There was one rule every civilization in the galaxy obeyed without question, without debate, without exception. Never go to Earth. No treaty enforced it. No fleet patrolled its borders. The rule survived on fear alone, a fear so old that no living being could say exactly where it began. Humanity was spoken of the way ancient sailors once spoke of sea monsters, rumored, dreaded, and never tested. They were called the most dangerous species ever born, a species so violent and unpredictable that 1,000 governments had quietly agreed on the same policy: stay away and pray they never leave home. Captain Tail had believed that rule her entire life, until the night it became the only thing standing between her and death. The attack came without warning. The Ka Empire's raiders dropped out of hyperspace in a formation Tail had never seen, surrounding the Resolute before her sensors even finished processing the threat. The first volley tore through the outer hull. The second silenced the engines. By the time she reached the bridge, half her crew was already dead, and the ship that had been her home for 11 years was little more than a drifting coffin. Life support, 31% and falling. Her first officer reported, voice flat with the particular calm of someone too exhausted to panic. No engines, no weapons, no allies close enough to reach us. Tail stared at the star charts, searching for any option that wasn't a slow death in the dark. Every friendly system was too far. Every neutral one had already refused ships fleeing the Ka Empire, unwilling to provoke a war they wanted no part of. She had exhausted every possibility the galaxy considered acceptable. That left only the one it didn't. Her hand hovered over the navigation console. Somewhere behind her, she heard her crew go silent, understanding what she was about to do before she said it aloud. Captain, her first officer said carefully, that's Earth. I know what it is. They say humans don't take prisoners. They say they don't negotiate. They say a lot of things nobody has actually confirmed in 300 years. Tail snapped, though her own hands were shaking. We have two options. Die here, quietly, exactly the way the galaxy expects. Or die out there, breaking the one rule everyone was too afraid to test. She looked at the failing life support readout. 19 minutes, maybe 20. I'd rather die finding out the truth. She set the course. The moment the coordinates locked in, something shifted in the air of the bridge. The specific silence of people crossing a line they'd been warned about since childhood. Every story she'd ever heard about humanity flooded back. The wars they'd supposedly fought against their own kind, the weapons they were rumored to have built and hidden, the reason entire empires had decided that avoidance was safer than confrontation. Tail had always assumed those stories were exaggerated. She was about to find out. The Resolute drifted through the dark for 6 hours, power failing system by system, until finally, impossibly, a signal broke through the silence. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a demand for surrender. It was a simple, direct transmission, spoken and accented but perfectly clear galactic standard. Unidentified vessel. This is Earth Defense Coordination. We have your distress signal. Hold position. Help is coming. Tail's first officer turned to her, eyes wide. That's not what the story said would happen. Tail said nothing. She was already watching the sensors, where 3 fast-moving contacts had appeared on an intercept course. Vessels of design she had never seen before, moving with precision that made her chest tighten with something between hope and dread. For the first time in her life, Captain Tail was about to meet a human being, and nothing the galaxy had told her would prepare her for what came next. The lead vessel slowed as it approached, running lights blinking in a pattern she didn't recognize but somehow understood as a greeting. A voice crackled over the comm again, warmer this time, less formal. This is Commander Hayes. We're going to get you out of there. Just hang on a little longer. Tail gripped the edge of her console, staring at the approaching ship, and felt the entire foundation of everything she'd been taught about the galaxy begin, quietly, to crack. Commander Hayes' ship closed the distance in minutes, and Tail watched with growing disbelief as human crew members in environmental suits crossed the gap between vessels without a single wasted motion. There was no posturing, no demand for surrender, no weapons drawn, just efficient, practiced urgency, the kind she'd only ever seen among crews who had done this exact thing many times before. They're cutting through the airlock, her first officer said, voice tight. Captain, Should we resist? Tail looked at the dying readouts around her. 12 minutes of air left. Resist with what? The airlock hissed open, and for the first time in galactic history, a human stepped willingly onto the bridge of an alien warship that hadn't been conquered first. Commander Hayes was younger than she expected, though something in his eyes suggested he'd seen more than his years should have allowed. He didn't raise a weapon. He didn't even seem surprised by what he found. A dying ship, a frightened crew, a captain bracing for the worst. "Captain," he said, "we need to move your people now. Your life support isn't going to hold." "Why are you helping us?" Tail demanded, unable to stop herself. "We're not your allies. We're not even supposed to be here." Hayes glanced around the wrecked bridge, at the injured crew members being carried toward the airlock by his own team. "You sent a distress signal. That's all we needed to hear." It wasn't the answer of a monster. It wasn't the answer of anything the galaxy had described. Tail followed her crew across the gap between ships in stunned silence, half certain she would wake from a fever dream and find herself back in the cold dark, still dying, still alone. She didn't wake up. The human ship was real, warm, and humming with a kind of quiet competence that unsettled her more than any show of force could have. Every station was staffed. Every system worked exactly as intended. There was no wasted panic, no confusion. Only the calm rhythm of people who had trained for exactly this moment for a very long time. "Your species has a reputation?" Tail said carefully, once her crew had been stabilized and the immediate danger had passed. "None of it prepared me for this." Hayes allowed himself a small, tired smile. "Most of it isn't true. The part that is true, you're not ready to hear yet." The words settled over Tail like a warning she couldn't quite place. She wanted to press him, but exhaustion and relief were pulling at her in equal measure, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to simply breathe. The journey to Earth took 3 days. Tail spent them watching, cataloging every detail she could, the discipline of the crew, the advanced but unfamiliar technology, the strange mixture of hospitality and secrecy that seemed to define everything the humans did. They answered every question she asked about her own crew's well-being instantly and fully. Every question about humanity itself, they deflected with practiced ease. When Earth finally appeared on the view screen, Tail expected a devastated world or a fortress world bristling with weapons, something that would explain the fear that had kept 1,000 civilizations away for centuries. Instead, she saw a blue and green planet that looked disarmingly like nothing at all, peaceful, ordinary, almost disappointing in its normalcy. "It doesn't look like what I expected," she admitted. "It's not supposed to," Hayes said. "What we built isn't on the surface." Before she could ask what that meant, the ship changed course, not toward any of the visible cities or stations orbiting the planet, but toward a mountain range on the northern continent, where sensors showed nothing but rock and snow. Nothing, until massive doors began sliding open in the mountainside itself, swallowing the ship whole into a facility so vast that Tail's instruments couldn't measure its true size. "Commander," she said slowly, "what is this place?" Hayes turned to her, and for the first time, something in his expression shifted. Not fear, not pride, but the weight of a secret about to be shared with someone outside his species for the first time in centuries. "Captain Tail," he said quietly, "welcome to the vault." The doors closed behind them with a sound like a held breath finally released, and Tail understood, with sudden clarity, that she had just been shown something no outsider was ever meant to see. The facility stretched beyond the range of her ship's sensors, vast enough that entire fleets could have maneuvered within it without touching a wall. Rows of vessels lined the cavern in the dim light, some clearly under construction, others sitting finished and silent, waiting. Engineers moved between them in organized swarms, and everywhere she looked, Tail saw evidence of scale that defied everything she thought she understood about a species of galaxy considered isolated and primitive. "How long has this existed?" she asked, unable to keep the disbelief from her voice. "Longer than you believe," Hayes said. "We started building the first sections of the vault before your empire had faster-than-light travel." Tail's mind raced through the implications. Centuries of construction, centuries of secrecy. A species the rest of the galaxy dismissed as dangerous but unremarkable had been quietly assembling something on a scale no one had imagined. and doing so completely undetected that not a single rumor had ever reached beyond Earth's borders. "Why?" she asked. "What are you preparing for?" Hayes didn't answer immediately. Instead, he led her deeper into the facility, toward a section where engineers were already gathered around the wreck of the Resolute, which had been transported inside during their approach. Tail's ship, the vessel she had assumed was beyond saving, sat surrounded by technology she didn't recognize, humming with a kind of quiet potential that made her chest tighten. "We're not going to just repair your ship, Captain," Hayes said. "We're going to rebuild it." Tail watched, speechless, as teams of engineers began stripping away damaged systems and replacing them with components that looked nothing like anything in Galactic shipbuilding. Weapon systems that didn't match any known design. Shielding architecture that seemed to bend the readings on her tricorder into nonsense. Every panel they removed revealed technology decades, maybe centuries, ahead of anything she'd encountered. "This is insane," her first officer murmured beside her. "This shouldn't be possible." "It shouldn't," Tail agreed, watching a section of hull that had been torn open in the attack begin to knit back together under human hands. And yet, over the following days, Tail was given quarters within the vault, and slowly, cautiously, Hayes began answering the questions she'd been afraid to ask. Not all of them. She could tell there were still limits to what he was willing to share, but enough to reshape everything she thought she knew. Humanity hadn't hidden because they were ashamed of what they were. They had hidden because they were terrified of what was coming, and they had spent centuries preparing quietly rather than risk drawing attention before they were ready. Ready for what? Tail pressed, again and again, and again Hayes deflected. Not with hostility, but with the careful patience of someone protecting a secret so large it needed to be revealed in pieces, or not at all. What he did tell her was enough to change her understanding of the fear that had kept the galaxy away. It wasn't fear of humanity's violence. It was fear of what humanity clearly knew that no one else did. The turning point came on the 5th day, when Hayes brought her to an observation platform overlooking the deepest section of the vault, and Tail finally understood the true scale of what she'd stumbled into. Below her, stretching farther than her eyes could follow, sat a fleet. Not dozens of ships, not hundreds, an armada. "Captain Tail," Hayes said quietly, watching her reaction, "I think it's time you understood exactly what humanity has been building, and why we're about to ask for your help." Tail stood frozen at the railing, staring down at a fleet, so vast it seemed to blur the line between shipyard and small galaxy. Vessel after vessel, class after class, stretched into the dim distance of the vault. Warships bristling with weapon systems she couldn't begin to identify. Support craft in numbers that suggested logistics planning on a scale no empire she knew of had ever attempted. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's real," Hayes said. "Every ship you see has been built, tested, and crewed. Most have never left this facility. Why? If you have this, if you've had this for who knows how long, why hide? Why let the galaxy believe you're some primitive, dangerous curiosity?" Hayes' expression tightened, the first real crack of emotion she'd seen from him since their rescue. Because the moment anyone learns what we're actually preparing for, the panic that follows could get more people killed than the threat itself. We needed time. We still need time. That's why the fear worked in our favor. Nobody comes looking for answers from a species everyone's too afraid to visit. Tail absorbed that in silence, watching engineering crews move between the massive hulls below. It was, she realized, the most honest explanation she'd received since arriving, and the most unsettling. 3 days later, the Resolute emerged from the repair bay, and Tail barely recognized her own ship. What had been a battered, dying vessel was now something entirely new, sleeker, more heavily armed, wrapped in shielding technology that made her sensors struggle to even register its own hull. When she took the ship on its first test flight, the difference was staggering. Systems responded faster. Weapons hit harder. The ship that had nearly become her grave now felt like the most powerful thing she had ever commanded. "This is what you do," she said to Hayes, once the test flight was complete. "You don't just build ships. You make them stronger than anyone thought possible." "We've had a long time to practice," he said simply. It was during the celebration of the Resolute's rebirth that Hayes finally revealed the true purpose behind the invitation. The rescue, the vault, all of it. Humanity had spent generations studying the Ka Empire, the very force that had crippled Tail's ship and killed half her crew. They knew its supply routes, its command structure, its weaknesses, all of it mapped in exhaustive, patient detail. We've been waiting for the right moment to move against them. Hayes said, "We have the fleet. We have the intelligence. What we don't have is a reason the rest of the galaxy will accept. Someone from outside Earth who's seen what the Ka Empire is capable of and is willing to stand beside us when we act." Tail understood, then, exactly what she was being asked. "You want me to help you start a war." "I want you to help me end one," Hayes said. "The Ka Empire has been expanding for a decade, crushing every system that resists them. Yours won't be the last ship they leave for dead. We can stop them, but only if this doesn't look like humanity acting alone. We need an ally the galaxy will believe." It was, Tail realized, the true price of her rescue. Not repayment demanded, but request offered with total honesty, laid bare in a way no galactic power had ever spoken to her before. She thought of her dead crew members, of the Ka raiders who had shown no mercy, of the centuries of fear that had kept humanity isolated for reasons she was only beginning to understand. She thought, too, of the Armada sitting silently beneath her feet, waiting for a single word. "If we do this," Tail said slowly, "there's no going back. Not for me, not for my people, not for the story the galaxy tells about Earth ever again." "No," Hayes agreed, "there isn't." Tail looked out at her rebuilt ship, gleaming under the vault's harsh lights, and made the second impossible decision of her life. "Then let's finish what the Ka Empire started," she said. "Let's go to war." The campaign against the Ka Empire began not with a declaration, but with silence. The particular silence of an enemy who doesn't yet know they're already losing. Human strategists had spent years mapping every artery of the Ka war machine, and when the human-led fleet finally moved, it struck with surgical precision. Tail, back in command of the transformed Resolute, led the opening assault on a supply convoy deep in neutral territory, the kind of target the Ka Empire had never bothered to heavily defend, because no one had ever dared attack it before. "Enemy convoy has no idea we're here," her tactical officer reported, disbelief evident in his voice as the newly upgraded sensors sliced through the Ka Empire's cloaking countermeasures like they weren't there at all. "Weapons range in 90 seconds. Then let's make sure they remember this day," Tail said. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. The Resolute alone, augmented with human technology, dismantled 3 Ka escort vessels before their commanders even managed to coordinate a response. It was the first sign of what was to come, and the first crack in the Ka Empire's assumption of total dominance. Word spread fast, but not fast enough. Coordinated strikes hit 6 more supply lines within days, each one crippling the logistics that had allowed the Ka Empire to sustain its endless expansion. Systems that had lived in fear of Ka retaliation for a decade suddenly found themselves watching an unknown alliance dismantle their oppressors piece by piece. "They're calling it rebellion," Hayes said during a strategy briefing aboard the human flagship, monitoring reports flooding in from across the front. "They don't know it's us yet. That won't last." It didn't. 3 weeks into the campaign, Ka Empire Command finally identified the pattern behind the attacks, and their response was immediate and brutal. A massive counteroffensive move to encircle the Allied fleet at the Corvin Relay, a strategic choke point neither side could afford to lose. For the first time since the campaign began, Tail found herself facing overwhelming numbers, watching as Ka warships poured into the system faster than her sensors could track. "They've committed nearly half their remaining fleet," her first officer reported, voice tight. "Captain, we are outnumbered 3-1. It was the darkest moment of the war, the point where victory seemed to slip away as quickly as it had come. Tail watched 2 of her escort vessels take catastrophic damage within minutes, watched the Ka formation tighten around the Allied fleet like a closing fist. For a terrible moment, she believed she had led her people and Hayes' into the very kind of death she had fled at the beginning of this entire story. Then Hayes' voice cut through the chaos on the comm, calm despite the storm around them. "Captain Tail, hold position. We've been waiting for them to commit." The human reserve fleet emerged from concealment behind the relay's gas giant, technology masking their approach until the exact moment it no longer needed to. What had looked like a trap sprung against the Allied fleet became, in an instant, a trap sprung against the Ka Empire itself. The reserve fleet struck the exposed flank of the Ka formation with devastating coordination, and within the hour, what remained of the Ka Empire's primary battle fleet was in full retreat. The tide had turned, and it never turned back. Over the following months, the Allied fleet pressed the advantage relentlessly, striking at every remaining Ka stronghold before their command structure could recover. Tail led assault after assault, watching her ship and her understanding of what humanity truly was grow sharper with every battle. These weren't the monsters the galaxy had feared. They were something far more calculated, a species that had spent centuries learning patience and had finally chosen the moment to stop waiting. The Ka Empire's capital fell without a shot fired. Its leadership, faced with the total collapse of their military and the loss of every supply line that sustained their war machine, surrendered within the week. The galaxy erupted with the news. Humanity, the species everyone had been warned to avoid, had just ended a war that no one else had dared to fight. But as Tail stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the Ka Empire's formal surrender broadcast across 1,000 systems, she noticed something in Hayes' expression that unsettled her far more than the battle they had just won. He didn't look victorious. He looked like a man who had just crossed off the first item on a very long list. "Commander," she asked quietly, "why don't you look happy?" Hayes turned to her, and the answer he gave would change everything she thought she understood about why humanity had built the vault in the first place. "Because the Ka Empire was never the real threat, Captain," he said. "They were just the first thing standing in our way." Tail felt the floor of her certainty give way beneath her. "What do you mean, the first thing standing in your way?" she demanded. "We just ended a war that killed millions. If the Ka Empire wasn't a real threat, then what has your species been preparing for all this time?" Hayes was silent for a long moment, the kind of silence that told her he had rehearsed this conversation many times in his head and still hadn't found an easy way to have it. "Walk with me," he said. He led her back to the vault, deeper than she had ever been allowed to go, past sealed doors and security checkpoints that hummed with a tension she hadn't felt anywhere else in the facility. At the end of a long corridor, they entered a chamber dominated by a single massive display, currently dark. "Everything we built," Hayes said. "The vault, the fleet, the technology we used to save your ship, none of it was built with the Ka Empire in mind. They were an obstacle, a dangerous one, but still just an obstacle because they happened to be in the path of something we've been tracking for a very long time." He activated the display, and Tail watched the star charts unfolded before her, marked with symbols she didn't recognize, red warnings scattered across dozens of systems, decades apart, each one representing something that made her stomach turn cold. "These are civilizations," Hayes said quietly, "or what used to be civilizations. Every one of these marks represents a species that simply stopped existing. No wreckage, no survivors, no warning, just silence, spreading outward for the last few hundred years, moving slowly, methodically, in our direction." "What did this?" Tail whispered. "We don't fully know," Hayes admitted. "We call it the Scourge, because that's the closest word we have for something that erases entire worlds without leaving a single trace of how or why. We've spent generations studying every fragment of evidence we could find. We've built ships, trained crews, and prepared defenses, all in preparation for the day it finally reaches populated space that we know about." He paused. The Ka Empire's territory sat directly between us and the outer systems where the Scourge was last active. We couldn't move against the real threat until that obstacle was gone. Tail stared at the map, at the slow, patient spread of destruction marked across the stars, and finally understood the full weight of what she had stumbled into when she broke the galaxy's oldest rule. "This is why you hid," she said slowly. "Not because you were dangerous. Because you were the only ones who knew what was actually coming, and you needed time the rest of the galaxy would never have given you if they knew the truth. Panic doesn't build fleets, Captain. Patience does." Hayes turned to face her fully. "But we can't do this alone. Not against something on this scale. We need allies who understand exactly what's at stake, and who are willing to stand with us when it finally arrives. Not because we asked nicely, but because they've seen the truth for themselves." Tail thought of everything that had brought her here. The attack that should have killed her, the rules she had broken in desperation, the rescue no story had prepared her for, the war she had just helped end. Every step had led, deliberately or not, to this exact moment, this exact choice. She thought of her crew, saved by a species the galaxy had wrongly feared. She thought of the countless worlds marked in red on the display before her, silent testimonies to a threat still moving through the dark. And she thought of what it would mean to walk away now, to return to a galaxy that would celebrate the Ka Empire's defeat without ever knowing how much greater a danger still loomed beyond it. "Then you have an ally," she said. "Not out of debt, not because I owe you my life, because I've seen what's coming, and I refuse to let my people face it unprepared the way I almost did." Hayes extended his hand, and Tail, for the first time, understood the gesture, an old human custom she'd learned meant to seal a bond between equals. She took it. In the months that followed, word of the scourge spread carefully, deliberately, to every civilization Tail, and Hayes believed could be trusted with the truth. Some refused to believe it. Others, like Tail, had already seen too much to deny it. Slowly, a new alliance began to form, not built on fear of humanity, but on the shared understanding of a threat far greater than any single species could face alone. The galaxy that had once whispered never go to Earth began, for the first time in centuries, to whisper something else entirely. That Earth might be the only reason any of them survived what was coming. Captain Tail often thought back to the night she broke the galaxy's oldest rule, expecting only death or captivity, and found instead the beginning of everything that mattered. Humanity's greatest secret hadn't been a weapon, or an army, or even the vault itself. It had been patience, the willingness to prepare quietly for a war no one else could see, and the courage to share that burden the moment someone proved worthy of carrying it. Humanity's greatest strength was never its weapons. It was a determination to protect others, even when the entire galaxy feared them.